doesn't repeat itself. That's a paradox. Oligarchs just continue to use the same old tricks. So what seems to us like history repeating itself is actually just empire using the same tactics. We, as a part of the LaRouche movement, which in Canada is the Committee for the Republic of Canada, as well as the Schiller Institute in Europe, we fight empire. That is what we do. And we fight it not just in the political sphere, but in the academic sphere. We have discovered that the axioms that our society and culture rest on are false. And that is where we highlight these paradoxes. I'll give you another paradox. Just as art should lift us up, and it should reflect society today. But today what affects most people is not art at all. It is TV channels, owned and controlled by only 5 companies. The paradox is that what we think of as art is not art at all, but a weapon of mass discharge. If we think that art on our TV screen is a reflection of society, it is the exact opposite. It is what they would like for us to have as a reflection of ourselves. It sounds, well, here's another paradox, that man is an animal. This is what we are taught. This is what our school systems teach us. As a movement, we have made this discovery that man, and you can call it a scientific discovery, you can call it a discovery of the mind. We are not an animal. And mankind is a beautiful species. And we have to really fight for that if we're going to have a future for our generation, for the younger generation especially. And during this critical time in history, what I invite you to do at this conference is to really locate yourself inside this historical moment. We're going to be having people coming back and forth. Some people are just running late, so try and, you know, the noise shouldn't be too bad, but we're going to have some really great speakers today. Paul Glumaz is a 40-year veteran with the LaRouche movement. He's from Seattle. He's joining us today to give us a strategic, he's going to be talking about the strategic threats that are facing mankind in the old system. And this is another paradox that the mainstream media will not tell you about, is that there is a new system. And that new system is the BRICS. And this is what we really want everyone to walk away from, is knowing that there is a future for mankind. Canada needs to accept the invitation from both China and Russia to join that new system and to develop ourselves and walk away from geopolitics. I'm going to just give a few housekeeping tips. If everyone could turn off their, you don't have to turn off the cell phones, just put the volume down. The bathrooms are just out into the hall. We are going to be having some breaks. We have, we started a little bit late today, so that's fine. We have the room until 7 o'clock. With the amount of time and the speakers that we have, we want to be able to get everybody in, but we also want to be able to have discussion. So I may have to cut things off and whatnot, but afterwards there's going to be lots of time, even out at the tables and in here for discussion and question and answer. So at this time I'll invite Paul Glumaz up. He's got a background in anthropology from Columbia University. He's got a wonderful fan in Daniel Esterlin, who's one of the foremost researchers of the Bilderberg Group. And he's also got a show on Latin RT, for Latin America. And he's got millions of viewers, and he's worked on some of, or interviewed Paul on his papers about this very significant fact that we are not an animal.
All right, thank you. So I want the purpose of this conference is to recruit you to the battle for the new system. So starting last year, a new system of economics that is now taking over the world has emerged. And it has now reached a point of growth and expansion that it can only be stopped by a nuclear war. So right now, the issue posed for Canada is, will Canada join this new system? The president of China, Xi Jinping, at the APEC summit 4 weeks ago, offered this to the United States and the rest of the world, which is not yet part of the new system. And he called it a win-win partnership based on cooperation between nations. Now, what I want to do here is give you a sense of what the new system is and contrast it to the old system. Now, the new system is a system of cooperation between nations, groups of nations, around development banks and transportation corridors, and other key aspects such as energy. It is, as Xi Jinping said, a win-win system, and everyone benefits. The method of financing this is not relevant. It is based on the physical growth in the economy. It's based on the future. And anything can be used to finance it. It's not part of the World Bank, it's not part of Wall Street, it's not part of, every government can do their part internally. It's not a financial system. However, what I'm going to tell you, my telling you this means it's going to mean very little to you, because you really don't get a sense of how revolutionary this system is until you compare it with the old system. And to understand the old system, you have to understand something that I'm going to call political physical geography, political economic physical geography. And the world and the powers that have run the world since the emergence of the mercantile powers of Europe, centered around the Dutch British East India Company and the British East India Company, the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company that developed out of Europe, used their power, their naval power, to essentially establish a power over the world. And the core of understanding the system is that it is controlled by controlling the oceans. It's a maritime system. It's based on controlling the sea lanes. It's based on control of the ability for goods to go from one place to another by sea, and raw materials to go from a place where raw materials are extracted to a place where they're put into manufacturing by sea. And this system is controlled that way. It's a physical geographical system. It's a physical economic geographical system. It's physical space. It's economic space and geography. Now, I'll give you an example. Take the Middle East, where oil was developed over 100 years ago. And up until recently, the Middle East was the fulcrum, and still is the fulcrum of oil production for the world. If you've noticed, there's been a constant conflict in the Middle East from the very beginning of this situation. You've also noticed that the sea lanes where the oil goes out can be easily disrupted. And it's the threat of disrupting that, which is one of the primary controls over politics in the world. That flow of energy for nations can be disrupted at any time. Therefore, you have to behave. So this is an example of how this works. Most of the world, up until now, when Xi Jinping announced the New Silk Road policy, is not connected transportation-wise except by oceans. Now, I'll go into how this control works. I'll take you back to the early part of the 1900s. There was a very important little war in South Africa, in a place called the Transvaal of South Africa, where the British essentially subdued the Afrikaners. Now, why did they do that? Because the Afrikaners had agreed with Germany to build a railway all the way from the Mediterranean down to Cape Town. That railway would have ended the control of that entire area by the sea, by maritime control. I'll give you another example. Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay went to war against Paraguay because Paraguay was committed to building a railway system and industrializing and building a railway system in South America on the model of what Lincoln later did in the United States. To this day, neither Africa nor South America have an integrated rail system where you can go from one part of South America to the east-west or north-south. The same for Africa. When you are connected, your neighbor country can help you. And you can help your neighbor country. You can produce things for them, they can produce for you. And you can tell the bankers, the geopoliticians, and the empire to go to hell. And that's economic physical geography. And this is what this is very important for people to understand this. What's so big about railways? What's so big about progress? No, you're talking about creating a situation where one nation sees their neighbor as an ally rather than competing with that nation for raw materials and resources and financing which are controlled from outside the region. So, oh, you want a loan, well, you gotta do this. Or you want us not to cut you off from food, you gotta do this. Oh, you want us not to cut you off from oil, you gotta do this. Oh, you're competing with this guy over here. That's the system. That's the system that's been in place. And entire generations of people have grown accustomed to that system. And what's the enemy to that system? Building railroads that connect one part with another part. So when Xi Jinping announced in October of last year that China's policy was the New Silk Road for Eurasia, and he said this publicly at a conference, this was a declaration of war. You know, this is a declaration of war against the powers that run the world. And as a footnote, this was the proposal that was placed forward over 20 years ago by the LaRouche movement and by Mrs. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, whom the Chinese call the New Silk Road Lady. And that's what, but the New Silk Road is a metaphor for an end of empire, a transformation of economic geographical space. Now, Now, if you look up here at the land bridge, okay, you're connecting North and South America with Eurasia. You're connecting Africa to all its components. You're connecting Asia to all its components. You're even connecting Japan and Indonesia. Because that is what allows nations to be brothers, not enemies, not be manipulated, not be controlled. Now you have a collision now with these two systems. If this new Silk Road and all these railways are allowed to be built, that is it. The world can no longer be controlled by controlling scarce resources or by controlling access to the sea lands. You can no longer control the world that way. This is big. This is the new system, or an aspect of the new system. Now, how are you going to power and have the energy to do all the manufacturing and all of the development that's going on? And our speaker at the end will go into that. But this means that the new system has a commitment, has to have a commitment to go with this of solving the energy issue, and the solution is nuclear power. And Russia, China, India have agreed. We're going to go nuclear. And we're going to not do old nuclear plants, we're going to do new nuclear plants. We're going to create the commitment to nuclear fission as a cornerstone of developing this whole system. And then, down the line, there's a necessity for going beyond that to fusion. And that is the new system. Now, will Canada join that new system? There are no other really options, because the old system, the pyramids of quadrillions of speculative investments, the criminality of the financial system, the increasing austerity being imposed on populations in North America and Europe by the system, is totally contrasted by the rapid rate of development that is now being unleashed around the world outside the old system. So how is this going to play out? How is this going to work? What's the problem? What's the hang-up? Why isn't the United States joining the new system right now? Why isn't Canada joining the new system? Why isn't the European nations joining the new system? Because they're under the control of an oligarchy. And that oligarchy has one last card in the deck to play. And that's the military option. And it's precisely the fear of the irrational use of nuclear weapons by the United States under the current Obama administration that right now is playing chicken games with Russia in the air, nuclear chicken games with Russia in the air and underwater. This is the fear that's keeping this oligarchy and the old system from breaking up and joining the new system. In many ways, the war to stop this new system has already been underway. The central issue is China. And to stop China, Russia is being targeted. To turn Russia away from China. Because its alliance with China is crucial. And that alliance was fully consolidated in May of this year. And there is now an active war going on. Not a passive war. It's not a threat of war. It's actually occurring. And it involves putting ABM systems that can tip the balance in favor of a first strike to NATO. It involves putting NATO troops on the borders of Belarus and Russia. It involves sanctions. It involves currency wars. against the currency of Russia. It involves oil price drops, which are wars against Russia. And it's becoming very frightening because of the situation in Ukraine. Now, 2 days ago, Putin gave his yearly national address to the Russian parliament and to the population of Russia. And this was very different from any previous speech he's ever given. This was a speech preparing the Russian population for war. He referenced the last big war, when the Wehrmacht came through, and in two days, 1 million people were dead or were captured, or 2 million people, I don't know exactly how many. He also referenced that the West had helped the Chechen terror operations. And he made it very clear that Russia is preparing. And and those who are pushing the button, who are pushing the drive to corner Russia in a nuclear confrontation, are also have their networks inside Russia preparing a color revolution. That is a revolution to bring down, like a mass, like riots and so forth and so on. Now, what is going on right now is that the mindset of the instrument for carrying this out is a group we call the neocons, the neocons. This is a special type of mental disorder that exists largely within Republican circles, but also in the United States, but also other circles. And these neocons are actually working very closely with Obama. And the key figure in this situation on the ground is a woman by the name of Victoria Nuland. And she is the Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian of the State Department. But she's really not that. She is the actual viceroy of the Ukraine today. She's actually running the Ukraine through her networks, who are now in the government. And this is the structure imposed on Ukraine, and she is actually calling the shots. And she is running this war operation against Russia from Ukraine and from the Baltics and from Poland. And her history is very straightforward. She was the assistant to Dick Cheney, and she is the wife of a man by the name of Robert Kagan, who is the founder of the Project for a New American Century, and he's also the co-founder of that. He's also the founder in 1999 of the Committee for Peace in Chechnya, which was an umbrella operation supporting Chechen terrorists. That's her husband. And Robert Kagan wrote an essay that Obama highlighted in his 2012 State of the Union message, entitled "The Myth of American Decline." And Obama made everybody in the administration read it. And the gist of this essay is that America is not in decline because it has overwhelming military power, and compares the United States at this moment with the British Empire in the height of its power in the 1870s, of its heyday. And that it is a matter of will in deploying that military power that determines whether the U.S. is in decline, not economics, not developing, but this military power. And this guy is a neoconservative, and And this is what Obama really represents, President Obama. And it shouldn't surprise you, because these guys are instruments. They're instruments of a power which cannot continue to exist on this planet. And they're now going to be dismantled, or they're going to be successful in getting a nuclear war going. Other than that, the new system will take over and will become the basis for the future of the human race. Now, I'm telling you this, but for most of you, I doubt this is real, because it is not in the media, especially not in the United States. So a few days ago, I had the pleasure of having a conversation at a book table with the very erudite-looking gentleman, who came up very quizzically and said, "Well, you know, what is this all about?" You know, and I explained the new system to him. And he says, "You know, I'm a well-informed person. I read the New York Times, I read Kiplinger, I read the Wall Street Journal, I read the London Financial Times, I watch PBS. I keep up on things. I never heard about this." And so we're dealing with a very special problem here, in that the vast majority of people, especially in the United States, and I assume in Canada as well, or I'm not sure about that, have not heard of this. And it's our job to change that. And so what we intend to do is circulate a very special report called "The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge," and the whole thing is in here. It's 368 pages. And we're asking people for a significant contribution of $200 for the PDF version, or $250 for the bound version. But this is very important to get this into the hands of people to look at, who have some significance. And this is what we're doing in the United States, and this is what we have to do also in Canada, and also in Europe, where we also have a movement. And also, we need to approach the ethnic communities. I say this because those who have come from other parts of the world do not necessarily have the same view, the same insular, parochial view of the world that you find in the average American or in the average Canadian, although there's not many average Canadians left, I don't think. There's been a lot of immigration. However, this is also where we have to get to these people and tell them, look, it's your responsibility in creating a future to get this out and to get to the leadership of your nation. And now, paradoxically, or not paradoxically, we are now back to a situation in many ways, although somewhat different, because John Fitzgerald Kennedy had a vision of doing global development. It may not have been exactly this form of it, but there are a lot of aspects which were similar. And at that time, the United States had the might, economic might, to be the anchor for developing Africa, for developing South America, and working with Europe, and even working with the Soviet Union, which is what he was proposing to do at that time. His assassination and the subsequent plunge of the United States into the Vietnam War, and the failure to end the Cold War, played a key role in preventing this from happening. But now China is in the same position with respect to the world that John F. Kennedy and the United States were back in 1960-61. And this time, This time, we have to succeed. Otherwise, there will be no human race. We will die in a nuclear war because there's no other option other than that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Robbie. Okay.
Okay. That gives you the most current view of what's going on in the political sphere that we're not being told about, of course. And before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to read to you, it's kind of going along the same theme as what I was talking about earlier. But, you know, in reference to what Paul was talking about, the average Canadian and American problem, in really understanding what these issues are, what they represent. And I was inspired by an article that Lyndon LaRouche wrote, who is the inspiration for this movement and the leader who started it. He wrote an article in the Fidelio. This is available online. It's a very good magazine. It's out of the Schiller Institute, published it out of Europe. And, you know, just again, in reference to what Paul was saying about why can't we see these things, because we're relying on our sense perceptions, and this is part of our problem. Now, as real as the threat is of World War III, with Russia preparing for that, don't let your senses deceive you into believing that it is inevitable. There is an answer to that. One of the answers is to get the camel to see his own neck. What do I mean by that? A camel does not look at his own neck. They cannot see themselves. They don't understand unless they're looking in a mirror. As you've seen a cat look in a mirror, it's a very strange thing. But as I was saying, in this Fidelity magazine, you know, one of the ways that we can see ourselves is through theater. Friedrich Schiller talked a lot about Shakespeare. And he was talking about the emphasis that should be placed on this as part of culture, as part of helping us understand ourselves. And I'll just read from this quickly. He said, as Schiller emphasizes, the man from the street should leave the theater as virtually a different person than had entered a few hours before. Irony, or paradox again. This effect is not like the experience of some fundamentalist parson's rant, some maudlin sort of edifying moral effect upon the audience. It is the effect on the citizen of looking over the shoulder of a history different than that of his own experience of life in his own time and place. Irony. Why could they not see the rottenness of their own culture? Could I do something about a tragic error in the culture of my own society today? What kind of a fool I would be if I could not look at my own culture as I could now see so clearly the insanity of that other culture presented to me by that play. Irony and paradox.